The story I am about to tell today is an incident that occurred during a trip made by a group of people to a waterfall located in Tak Province. On the day they chose to go camping, they specifically decided to travel on a regular weekday rather than a holiday. This decision was made to avoid the crowds of other tourists. However, their choice on that occasion led them to an unexpected encounter with something mysterious in the middle of the forest. This is the story titled The Dark Waterfall. Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. The entire story took place around the year 2008, during the last quarter of the year. Yathan planned a trip to a waterfall located within a wildlife sanctuary in the Umfang district of Tak Province. This waterfall was a well-known tourist destination, famous for its distinctive large limestone cliff, which gave it a beauty and uniqueness unmatched by other waterfalls. At that time, Yathan decided to travel on a regular weekday to avoid the chaos and crowds often found at tourist spots during the holidays. He intended to arrive at the waterfall on October 7th, coinciding with his birthday. The journey began on the night of October 6th, with Yathan accompanied by two friends, Justin and Max. Their plan was simple: spend one night relaxing amidst the beauty of nature and return the following morning. The three were longtime friends who shared a love for adventure, each with unique skills and personalities that complemented one another. This trip was a special opportunity for them to reunite after pursuing separate paths in life. Among them, Justin stood out for his strong belief in and deep understanding of the supernatural. He had grown up with a renowned hunter in northern Thailand, gaining experience in forest life and survival from a young age. His faith in forest spirits and mystical entities was deeply ingrained, and he always brought flowers, incense, and candles to perform rituals of respect when entering the wilderness. Moreover, Justin had a strong sixth sense and could often sense anomalies accurately. As they drove toward their destination, Justin appeared unusually quiet, unlike Yathan and Max, who chatted animatedly in the car. Their laughter filled the air, creating a lively atmosphere. Yathan teased Justin for being so silent, jokingly asking if he was even present for this trip. Justin responded with a weak smile but said nothing, his expression suggesting that he was deep in thought. Despite this, the journey went smoothly, and they reached the waterfall as planned at around 6 a.m. That morning, everything was as Yathan had hoped. The camping area near the waterfall was empty, leaving them alone to enjoy the tranquility of nature. The atmosphere was peaceful, with only the sound of the waterfall echoing in the cool air. They chose the best spot to set up their tents and began planning their relaxing evening amidst the stunning natural scenery. The serene environment and continuous sound of the waterfall eased their travel fatigue. While Yathan and Max unloaded the car and set up the tents, Justin wandered off to a corner of the waterfall and lit incense and candles. Yathan assumed he was performing his usual ritual to pay respect to the spirits of the land. However, this time Justin seemed more serious and spent longer on the ritual than usual. Max, noticing this, couldn't resist calling out to Justin to come back and help with the tent. Justin's reply, however, left both of them momentarily stunned. "Hey, tonight doesn't feel right," Justin said with a grave expression. He explained that the atmosphere felt like a closed forest night, a term used by hunters to describe times when spirits or malevolent forces were active, or when nature was on the brink of danger. Justin explained that, according to what he had learned as a child, if forest spirits didn't grant permission to enter their territory, unexpected harm could follow. When I performed the ritual just now, the forest spirits didn't grant permission. We should pack up and camp further down, Justin urged. But his warning was dismissed. Yathan and Max laughed, brushing off his concerns by pointing out that this was a public park visited by many tourists, none of whom performed such rituals. Despite Justin's reluctance, he had no choice but to stay. After setting up the camp, the three began their evening activities around the campfire. The atmosphere seemed normal and cheerful, with the sun slowly setting behind the towering limestone cliffs, painting the horizon in golden hues. Their campfire crackled brightly as the sound of the waterfall mixed with their lively conversation. Max suggested they take a dip in the waterfall's pool before the night grew colder. All three changed into swimwear and plunged into the refreshing water. The cold water was invigorating, easing the fatigue from their long journey. However, Yathan soon felt something odd while in the water. It was as if small fish were nibbling at his legs repeatedly. Not just one fish, but several. He checked underwater multiple times, but saw nothing. Feeling uneasy, he decided to get out of the water to inspect his legs for leeches or other creatures, but found nothing. The strange experience left Yathan feeling wary, so he refrained from joining his friends in the water again. Instead, he returned to the campsite to prepare dinner. By then, the sky had shifted from golden to dark. The last light of day faded away, and the surroundings grew increasingly still, leaving only the sound of the waterfall resonating around the campsite. On the way back to the tent, Yathan walked past a large tree near the campsite. When he looked up to examine the branches, he froze in shock at what he saw. Perched high on one of the branches, something he shouldn't have been able to see was clearly visible. A hand. It was the back of someone's hand, wrapping itself around the tree trunk as if its owner were hiding behind it. Before he could react further, the figure leaped backward, disappearing behind the tree, accompanied by the loud sound of water splashing. Max and Justin, who were still playing in the water, turned immediately toward Yathan in alarm, as they knew no one else was around. Despite his shock, Yathan shouted for his friends to get out of the water, but he refrained from telling them exactly what he saw, worried it might cause unnecessary panic. His mind briefly flashed back to the strange sensation of fish biting at his legs earlier, making him wonder if that had been caused by something else entirely. When the three of them regrouped at the tent, Max tried to rationalize the sound, suggesting it could have been a large fish jumping to catch prey. Justin, however, leaned closer to Yathan and asked quietly, "What did you see just now?" Yathan only shook his head without responding, leaving the conversation hanging in uncertainty. They then went their separate ways to change clothes. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, the group gathered around the campfire to keep warm. They shared stories to lighten the mood, accompanied by the soothing sound of the waterfall. Over time, the conversation shifted to horror stories, seemingly encouraged by the mysterious atmosphere of the forest. Justin began recounting a strange tale from his youth, about his experiences sitting in hunting hides deep in the forest. But as Justin reached the part of his story where he was about to be haunted, his narration was interrupted by an unexpected voice. A deep, raspy male voice suddenly interjected, saying, "I'm not haunting you." Startled, Justin stopped mid-sentence and looked at Yathan and Max with suspicion. "Who said that? Whose voice was that?" he asked, his voice tinged with alarm. Both Yathan and Max, equally unsettled, didn't answer. Instead, they scanned their surroundings cautiously. The three of them stood and began searching the area, but found no source of the mysterious voice. Yathan couldn't help but think back to Justin's earlier warning about the closed forest night. Perhaps there was some truth to it after all. As the chill of the night crept in, the three noticed a small light flickering on the road leading into the waterfall area. At first, it resembled the headlights of a vehicle, but then it transformed into a red glow, like the taillights of a car. Yathan exhaled in relief, saying, "At least we're not alone tonight." But Justin immediately interjected, his tone grave. "That's not a car." Justin stood abruptly, urging everyone to retreat to the tent immediately. Without explaining further, he climbed inside the tent, his face pale with fear. Though confused, Yathan and Max followed his lead. Shortly after they zipped themselves inside, the mysterious light moved closer. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that it wasn't from a car at all. It was a glowing orb, about the size of a soccer ball, floating silently through the air. The orb slowly rose above the treetops before vanishing, leaving behind the eerie cry of an owl, a barn owl, its screech echoing through the dark forest, sending chills down their spines. Justin's voice quivered as he broke the silence. "See? I told you, that wasn't a car. This is what a closed forest night is like. And now it's too late to leave. There's only the forest ahead. If we try to leave now, who knows if we'll make it to the bottom safely." After finishing his ominous statement, Justin hastily grabbed a prayer book from his bag. With trembling hands, he pressed them together in prayer and began chanting holy verses aloud. After the strange events subsided, the three decided to stay in the tent and attempt to sleep. None of them spoke a word, lying silently under the dim light from the campfire that seeped faintly into the tent. Justin's continuous chanting provided some solace, though it did little to quell their fears. Before long, Yathan unknowingly drifted off to sleep. But he was abruptly jolted awake in the middle of the night when the tent began to shake inexplicably. As he opened his eyes, the sight before him made his heart race uncontrollably. He saw Justin standing upright, almost touching the ceiling of the tent, slowly spinning in place. The tent quivered with his movements. Alarmed, Yathan turned to Max, who was lying beside him, only to find Max's body stiff and trembling. Max's eyes had rolled back, showing only the whites, and he struggled to breathe as if he were suffocating. Yathan desperately shook Max with all his strength. Eventually, Max bolted upright, screaming hysterically, "The forest spirit is sitting on me. It's trying to take my life. Help me." Meanwhile, Justin continued spinning in the tent, seemingly unaware of what was happening around him. The chaos escalated into pure pandemonium. Realizing they couldn't stay there any longer, Yathan slapped Max to snap him out of it. Together, They struggled to carry Justin's thrashing body to the car. After much effort, they managed to haul him in and drove away from the campsite as quickly as possible. The road down the mountain was a narrow dirt track, flanked by dense forest on both sides. The scraping of branches and shrubs against the car's body created an unsettling cacophony, amplifying the already eerie atmosphere. Yathan instructed Max to retrieve the prayer book from the car and start reciting it in hopes of bringing Justin back to his senses. Max began chanting shakily, but as he did, Justin, sitting in the back seat, turned to glare at him. His eyes were bloodshot, and his expression was unervingly menacing. The voice that came out of Justin wasn't his own. It was raspy, deep, and unfamiliar. An old man's voice. "Do you think you can drive me away?" It mocked, before eerily joining in with the same chant Max was reciting. Justin's sinister laughter echoed within the car, mocking the sacred verses with chilling defiance. As the car swerved along a curve, Yathan suddenly saw something dart out of the forest. It slammed into the side of the car with a forceful thud, making the vehicle jolt violently. Everything fell eerily silent for a moment. Yathan pulled over and left the engine running while he stepped out to inspect the damage. He found no trace of whatever had hit the car, not even under it. However, a noticeable dent on the car's side confirmed the impact had been real. Before he could investigate further, Max's panicked voice rang out from inside the car. "Yathan, get back in the car now. I saw something in the forest." A shiver ran down Yathan's spine. Though he hadn't seen anything himself, fear compelled him to scramble back into the car without looking back. As soon as he shut the door, Max whispered, "I saw a woman." She had no lower body. She was floating in and out of the trees. Yathan's heart sank, and he reached for the gear shift, ready to drive off. But just as he was about to move, the car's engine stalled. While Yathan frantically tried to restart the car, shadowy figures began to emerge along the roadside. The dense thickets of trees on both sides seemed alive with movement. Translucent, foggy shapes writhed and flickered in the darkness, their forms faintly resembling human figures but never fully materializing. The shadows floated and circled the car ominously, their intent unclear but undeniably threatening. As tension mounted, Justin, who had been momentarily still, suddenly started thrashing his limbs wildly, striking the car interior with alarming force. His voice, hoarse and dry, proclaimed, "My followers have arrived." The knocking and pounding on the car from outside grew louder, as if unseen hands were striking it from all directions. The vehicle rocked violently, as though it were being shaken by a mob. Just as despair began to set in, the car's engine roared back to life. Without hesitation, Yathan slammed the gear into place, revved the engine, and sped away, leaving the haunted stretch of forest behind them as quickly as he could. As Yathan drove cautiously through the forest, filled with dread, his eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror. In the reflection, he could see countless dark shadows floating just above the ground, following closely behind the car. His heart raced with the desire to speed up, but the winding, treacherous road made it impossible to go any faster. Determined to focus, he avoided looking in the mirror and concentrated on navigating the path for several minutes. When he finally glanced back again, the shadows had gradually disappeared into the darkness, prompting a deep sigh of relief. Looking over at Justin, he noticed that his friend had passed out, while Max sat beside him, carefully supporting Justin's limp body. The atmosphere in the car was eerily quiet, broken only by the sound of their breathing and the faint hum of the car's weary engine. Yathan focused on getting them off the mountain, planning to regroup in a nearby village at the base of the hill. He thought they could retrieve their belongings at sunrise. After about 5 minutes of driving, Justin's faint voice broke the silence. "Turn into the temple," he murmured. "There's a temple down below. We should go there first. I don't think this is over yet." Yathan glanced at Justin in shock, but Justin continued explaining. "They've attached themselves to us. They're wandering spirits with no home, and they're trying to use our bodies to leave this place. I was the weakest, so they chose me. If I didn't have protection, and if you hadn't helped me, I wouldn't have survived." Without hesitation, Yathan followed Justin's advice and turned into a small temple located at the foot of the mountain. They arrived in the dead of night and quickly parked the car before heading to the temple's pavilion to rest. It was around 4 a.m., and the temple was tranquil at first. But as they sat there catching their breath, the silence was broken by the sound of dogs howling and barking furiously. The temple dogs charged toward the front gate, barking as though they had seen something terrifying. Justin, watching the commotion, whispered weakly, "They followed us down from the forest. If we hadn't come to the temple, it would have been much worse." The dogs' frantic barking continued for over 20 minutes before they finally quieted down and dispersed, leaving the three friends in uneasy silence. They sat swatting mosquitoes until dawn. At sunrise, they took the opportunity to offer food and alms to the monks at the temple. After completing the merit-making, they drove back to the campsite to retrieve their belongings. However, the sight that greeted them left them stunned. Their tent and gear were scattered as if someone had ransacked the area. Strangely, there were no signs of wild animals or any logical explanation for the disarray. After quickly gathering their belongings, the group wasted no time leaving the site. The trip to the waterfall became an unforgettable experience for all three, a chilling memory etched permanently in their minds. When I finished reading Yathan's account, the moral of the story stood out clearly. Never disregard the warnings of those with experience. In this case, Yathan and Max had dismissed Justin's earlier caution, which ultimately led them to face this harrowing ordeal. What about you? Have you ever had a spine-chilling experience while visiting a park or a remote area with no other tourists around? If so, share your eerie stories in the comments below. Before we wrap up today's tale, don't forget to like and subscribe to support us in sharing more bone-chilling stories with you. If you're someone who enjoys tales of the paranormal or hair-raising experiences, let us be your go-to source for delivering the chills.